If you look at the rise of the health crises that we have been in, it directly correlates with the loss of healthy soil. And that's one of our main primary outcomes for this type of regenerative agriculture.
Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing personal stories of transformation from people whose lives have been touched by cancer. My name is Cheryl Buck, and I will be guiding today's conversation. Our guest today is Doniga Markegard, a regenerative rancher, author, and activist who, along with her family, tends 11,000 acres of land along the California coast. Hi, Doniga.
Hi, Cheryl.
Welcome to Cancer Talks.
Thank you for having me. It's always so great to talk with you and see you. So wonderful to be here.
Well, it's so wonderful for me to have you here. And ever since we started this podcast, which was March of, so about 7 or 8 months ago, and I have my wish list for who I would like to have a conversation with or an interview with, and you're always at the top. So I'm glad that we were able to schedule this, and it's such an honor for me, especially to introduce you to our audience. So for it's 7 months that Cancer Talks has been doing podcasts, and we've been having conversations with people who have a personal relationship with cancer or a close family member who has been touched by cancer. And when we talked a few weeks ago, you indicated that you haven't had that experience. However, you have a close and personal relationship with our planet. And I think that we can say, without stretching our imagination too far, that the planet has cancer. So that, to me, is your being personally touched by cancer. And one of the things I heard Dr. Zach Bush a couple of years ago, he was talking about cancer and how if you take a 30,000-foot aerial view over Los Angeles, he said, it looks like Los Angeles has cancer. There's like a tumor, and it has tendrils or legs that are spreading out, north, south, east, and west. And those legs are looking for nutrients. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It really gives you a perspective of how in the last just few hundred years out here in the West, we have dramatically shifted the health of the ecosystems and the ocean. And I never really thought about it that way from that, high bird's eye view perspective, but I can really see that sort of tendrils going out into these pristine river systems and out into the ocean, of course, which we know is so heavily impacted by everything we do.
Yes, exactly. I know it's frightening when you hear an example like that. It's really scary what's happening. So that's one of many reasons why I'm thrilled that you've taken on the job that you've taken on. And I know a lot of other people that are just grateful that you've taken on really the job of spreading the message that our planet can be treated for this ailment and can be revived.
Yeah, thank you.
So I wanted to just start with how we met, and I kept thinking, how many years ago did we meet? And then I remembered your son, Larry, who was, he was very short then.
Yeah.
he was a growing boy. So I don't know how old he is now, but he is like, is he almost as tall as your husband, Eric?
Yeah, I think he's just about to pass him up.
Oh
He's
my gosh.
so yeah, he's 14 now, and
Oh my gosh, he's only 14. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, I think
So,
it was all that raw milk and
yeah,
grass-fed meat
right.
early on, right? And bone
Yes.
broth.
And bone broth. Okay, well that is how we met. We met through bone broth,
Yep, yep.
right? Right. And
Yeah.
I think that we actually met on one of your ranch days. So you and your husband Eric and your four kids. Well, I don't know to what extent they do, but it seems like they're very much a part of ranch life, of what you do on the ranch. And you have ranch days, I think once or twice a year, and I think that's when we met. I remember being up on your property and walking across the what if it wasn't a ranch, you'd call it your front yard,
Yep.
and and then looking to the left and seeing the magnificent Pacific Ocean like I've never seen it before. And that's something you
Mhm.
get to look at every day.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. We
amazing.
we really are blessed to be
Yes.
to be here in this incredible grassland, and we yeah, I feel it every morning. I feel so thankful just to be able to walk out and have
Hmm.
relationship with the grasses and the birds and the livestock that we raise, and of course just seeing the Pacific Ocean is just so, just gives me the sense of there anything is possible.
Yes, exactly. So I'd love to hear and share with our listeners how you got here, how you got to being and doing who you are and what you're doing from a teenager. And I'm getting all of this from your book, which we'll also talk about. The title is Dawn, DAWN, again, Tracking the Wisdom of the Wild, which I read when it first came out, and I can't recommend it enough. I learned so much from the book, and I hope you'll talk a little bit about that too. But you sort of started life as a teenager who didn't feel like you fit in, and you miraculously, I will say, and you can tell us what happened, found yourself in a wilderness immersion or awareness school,
Mhm.
and you went to tracking white wolves in Alaska and then mountain lions in California, and you became a rancher, a mother, and the activist that you are today. So, will you fill in the some details on your journey so far?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in a rural area in Western Washington, and my mother, did a wonderful job as a single mother of three girls, and just really helping us to gain appreciation for nature and also food. We prepared
Hmm.
all of our own food from scratch. We always had a big garden, and she always sort of wanted us to question where our food came from. We didn't eat meat when I was growing up. We would eat fish that maybe my uncles caught, so we knew that the kind of life they had. And I would say that those were some of my greatest memories were spending time out in the garden or on my horse or down at the river. And so
Hmm.
I always had this real deep appreciation and connection with nature. And that's where I felt most at peace. So
Yes.
naturally, when I was going through my teenage rebellious stage to the point where, and this will make all mothers cringe, I ran away from home and hitchhiked all over the country and
Oh God.
down to Mexico and Guatemala and Alaska. And,
Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
that. But naturally, I intuitively came back to nature.
Hmm.
And it was, I say, that path to nature really saved my life. And, I really mean that because I
Hmm.
was putting myself in very dangerous positions, which, I would say a lot of teenagers do as they experiment with different things. And so when I found the Wilderness Awareness School in Washington State and spent a lot of time around Indigenous elders that would sort of magnetize to that school for one reason or another. Like they always had really synchronistic stories of how they got there, a Maori elder coming or who would become my adoptive father, Gilbert Walking Bull, who's a Lakota holy man coming to the school, or a Haida elder. And I think during that time, it was like the youth that were learning about nature really gave them hope, because maybe when they were little kids, they remembered stories from their grandparents about the importance of having these relationships with all life, not just with your human family, but all of your non-human family. So the fact that there was a school and there were kids, that was 100% of our curriculum was nature. And it wasn't nature in the form of like a conventional school learning about nature. It was nature with a full immersion of learning the language of the birds, learning how to be comfortable in the wild, learning how to survive in the wilderness, how to track animals, which tracking, there's something that happens to you when you're following in the footsteps of a wild creature. And at first you don't really understand what's going on with you. But then after a while, when you're following the tracks, you're paying attention to everything around you, you start to change, and your brain starts to change, and you connect to your senses in a way that brings about a sixth sense. And so you start to sort of feel the tracks, or feel when an animal is nearby. And so that was my training for all of my high school, because after I had run away from home, I really didn't fit in conventional school. So it was, again, through synchronicity that, my mom and I found this school, and it was like, okay, good. It's something that she's passionate about, and it keeps her close to home, so I can keep an eye on her. And so that's kind of, my upbringing. And
Fantastic. Was your mother relieved when you got home from all of your traveling?
Yeah.
I know she was relieved, but
absolutely.
That must have scared her, because you were pretty young.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And for her being a single mother, she didn't really have someone to, there to support her in that. And my oldest sister, was there and helping her a lot. But yeah, it was a really tough time, and we've gone through a lot of healing since then. So
yes,
yeah,
your mother's wonderful. I remember meeting her several times at the farmer's market when I was selling the bone broth. Yeah, I just have to say that when you said you were 100%, I think you said, immersed in nature in your schooling, and I had this quick thought of my high school years, 0%. I mean, maybe when we were outside on the grass playing whatever, one of those games where you kick the ball. I forget what it's called. But wow.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy to think that it's like the way that the youth are put in, it's like we're put in boxes from birth. Like, okay, so you're born in a square box of a hospital or a house, and then you're put into a box of a car, and then you're moved to a box in a school, and it's like you're just boxed in.
Yes.
So, and then no wonder why youth, especially when they get to teenage, they want to break out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And your home is a box and
Yep.
ay, ay, ay. So then talk about tracking white wolves in Alaska. How did you end up there?
Yeah, well, that's kind of an interesting story, and I talk about this in my book. But
Mm-hmm.
I I had a dream when I was on Vancouver Island of a white wolf, and it was like this wolf was calling to me. And so I made my way up to Alaska. And as soon as I went across the border, I saw a wolf. It wasn't the white wolf, but I
Mm.
saw a wolf. So I was like, okay, that's a good sign. And then I ended up out in Denali, and you know how things, you look back at certain times in your life and you think like, really, did that really happen? Because
Mm.
I had been going to the Wilderness Awareness School, but I had sort of taken the summer to travel around, and I had heard that, you know, I had known that the Wilderness Awareness School was going to Alaska to track wolves in Denali, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know any of the details. And of course, back then there wasn't cell phones or email, or, you know, you just didn't, you didn't communicate that way.
Yes, right.
um, and so I showed up in Denali, and there was the group from Wilderness Awareness School.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it was
Right.
like, oh, well, I guess I'm supposed to be here right now.
Right, right, right.
And sure enough, it was just this really strong draw. I mean, anytime you get to go to a wilderness area like Denali, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
certain places that I've been in, Idaho and Montana, and just, I mean, I know there's places like that in California. I just haven't explored it enough. You just get this sense of like, wow, awe, and this is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's something that speaks to you in those pure wilderness areas that just like makes you feel so alive.
Yeah.
And so,
Mm.
and when you're alive and you're curious and you're passionate, and you know, you feel so good, then you know, things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I learned how to track wolves and their patterns. And sure enough, I saw that white wolf
Wow.
in my dream while I was tracking the packs of wolves there in
Uh-huh.
Denali. So felt really blessed. Like, okay, this is my path. And so I spent the next 7 years really absorbing everything I could about wolves and following the reintroductory effort in Idaho with the wolves coming back. And, you know, it's just ironic that I was tracking wolves that were then preying on livestock. And so there was, you know,
Uh-huh.
I was seeing some of the start of that conflict of wildlife and farming. And, you know, I had a different perspective then, because of course now I'm on the other side of it. You know, I'm the one
On the
tending,
wolf side, yeah.
well, I'm the one tending the livestock,
Oh,
right?
now you do. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly,
So
exactly.
then it was like, I didn't see that cattle were an integral part as well in the ecosystem and in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just ironic that I then became a cattle rancher, and now I'm seeing like connecting with other cattle ranchers that are doing incredible things in these areas where there's wolves, like Montana and Idaho, where they're, you know, really working with their herds to reduce that conflict between livestock and predators.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing is the result of the way that they're moving their herds across the landscape to reduce that conflict is also helping the land too. So it's helping to graze the plants in a way where they regenerate and draw down carbon. So it's, you know, I really want to tell more of that story, that we can work to steward the land. It's not going to look, you know, it's never going to look like it did 300 years ago when the indigenous people that tended to the wild and stewarded this land were in such harmony because their food source depended on it. I mean,
Yes.
we've destroyed so much that we need to work with nature to just help to regenerate and learn from that indigenous knowledge. Even if we're not living primitively, we can still help to, engage with all life and help all life to flourish.
Cancer Talks is an interdependent community project with a production team of 3, and we count on your contributions. We'd like to thank Carolyn Buckloose and Rob Evans for their contribution. If you've learned from or been inspired by these conversations, please consider joining Carolyn and Rob and becoming a donor. To support us starting at $5 a month or to make a larger tax-deductible contribution, visit patreon.com/cancertalks. So the wolves or the predators to, well, back 300 years ago, it was buffalo or maybe antelope here in California.
An elk, yep.
An elk, right. And didn't the fact that there were predators keep the herds moving? So they, as I say, ran up and down California through the Central Valley and made it, at that time, very fertile.
Yeah.
Do I have that right? Is that how?
Absolutely. And kind of going back to how this all ties into our own health is that really our health is directly linked to the health of the soil. And if you look at the rise of the health crises that we have been in, it directly correlates with the loss of healthy soil. And so that's one of our main primary outcomes for this type of regenerative agriculture is to build healthy soil that can hold water and hold nutrients and can store carbon and have an intact mycelium web so that diversity below ground will help to grow healthy plants. And it might be, healthy vegetables or healthy trees or healthy grasses that then the livestock can eat. And really the one most effective way of building that soil is through these large herds of grazing animals. It's sort of like the bison built the prairie and they built those deep soils that, were allowed those settlers to come in and just farm the heck out of it and produce incredible yields until they, tilled it so much that they created the Dust Bowl. And so it was those deep prairie ecosystems that really supported so much life and helped keep the planet in balance. Really, grasslands cover 40% of the Earth's surface. And so if you think about the purpose of grasslands, it's to support grazing animals, which then also support predators. So there's this predator-prey dance that's happening on these grasslands. So if you remove the herds of animals, then the biodiversity on the grasslands starts to plummet. And we know that biodiversity is so key to health. It's kind of like, if we have a healthy gut microbiome that's diverse and, we've been raised in environments that aren't totally sterile. We've been raised to play in the dirt and have contact with animals. This has been shown that it builds your immunity, having that diversity. Yes. So it's the same with the planet. Having diversity aids to healthy soils and healthy food. So if the animals are removed, then certain species of plants will take over, shade out other species, and then you have not only biodiversity loss, but you have a release of carbon. So, and we've work with a lot of scientists, soil scientists that have documented this. So on lands that are not grazed, that are just sort of left to, I'm in air quotes here, go back to nature,
Right.
they are actually releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And
Yes.
on lands that are grazed holistically, where the animals are moved, they actually draw down carbon. And the potential is huge to draw down massive amounts of carbon.
Can you tell that story of when you were on your ranch and the neighboring ranch was just basically dead,
Mm.
And okay, do I remember this correctly that you went to the neighbor and said, "Let me show you what I can do or what my my cattle can do"?
I think, for us, it's more like we've taken land that has been really hammered by grazing animals because, agriculture is tough.
Hmm.
And the last thing I want is for your listeners to, come from this and say, "Oh, farmers are bad." It's like, no, there's bad
Right.
farming practices, but
Yes.
most farmers and ranchers at their heart, they're not bad people.
Yes. Right.
um, they're just raised in a box, right?
Yes.
And don't know, and honestly, and the box is so tight. They really have no avenue to break out of that box. And that is not the
Yes.
fault of the farmer. That is the
Yes.
fault of heavy government subsidies,
Mm.
a market that requires cheap food,
Hmm.
and not a lot of support, honestly, for making a transition to something that's going to be healthier.
Yes.
So, whenever I talk to farmers and ranchers, it's like the best way is just to, sit down with them at their kitchen table and hear about what's going on. And
Hmm.
so many times it's like they know that there's a better way. They know that, yeah, glyphosate is not good. They see their family members dying of cancer and they
Mm.
see how, but they don't know a way out. They're in so much debt and they rely on that subsidy and they've
Hmm.
been doing it for so long, and it's too much risk. It's
Yes.
too much risk. It's their livelihood is at stake. So it's, my approach to working with farmers and ranchers is, much more gentle, I think, where it's like, okay, yeah, let's look at what's possible. But really first you need to find a market for them that's profitable. And then once they see that it can be profitable and the risk is cut out, then that's when the transition can happen. So,
Yes.
I mean, for us, my husband is a sixth generation cattle rancher. They always, did a really good job with managing the grassland. So, they never had any issues with that.
Hmm.
His dad was very in tune with nature and the grasses and moved the animals.
Really?
However,
Wow.
they
Yeah.
sold their calves after they were weaned from their moms
Mm.
to a public auction to then be fattened in a feedlot.
Hmm.
So, which is what happens to the majority of cattle in the US. They
Hmm.
start out on grass, and some ranchers, have really good practices. Some ranchers have really bad practices,
Uh-huh.
but they all end up in the same place and are bought for the same market price.
Uh-huh.
And it's tough because, right now, especially in California, it's like we see beef prices going up in the supermarket, but cattle that are being bought from ranchers, prices going down. So
Oh.
it's not a great future for ranching. But, kind of back to my point is that, if we were to shift to where those animals, instead of going and being fattened in a feedlot in inhumane conditions, could
Hmm.
stay out on the grass and fertilize the grasslands and help to keep the fire danger down, and be finished on grass and
Hmm.
sold as, grass-fed beef, then imagine all of that grassland that was converted to grow corn and soy to be fed to the livestock that are being fed in the feedlot. It's like, that's the basic thing, is like, choose 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. And we need to do that quick and at a massive scale.
So that's really like your main message, is to get the cattle out of the CAFOs,
Yep.
the contained, I forget what that stands for, feeding operations, get
Yep.
them out of there. And an interesting thing that I've noticed in talking with people is that there's not an understanding. It's like the CAFO, the feeding lots, and then the cattle that's on grassland, it's like it's collapsed. The distinction. People don't, that I've talked to, often don't, they just think cattle's bad,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just having this conversation with my son and some of his friends that are, these youth activists, and they work with Indigenous youth, around the world, really.
Wow.
And they come to the perspective that is sort of like, okay, these people, they rely on eating this type of food. That's
Yes.
part of their culture. And it's kind of like saying cows are bad is like saying all people are bad. And so there, cows can be good, or they can be bad. People can be good for the environment, or people can be bad for the environment.
Right.
It's really not. It's really how the animals are raised and how the relationship with the environment is. So, we get that a lot here in Silicon Valley, of just like, oh, get rid of all the cows because they're the root of so many of the problems. Well, they're not seeing the whole picture. They're not seeing that if you're connected to nature and you mimic nature and you're utilizing these cattle like the elk or the bison, and you're moving them like the predators would move them, then you're seeing incredible results on the ground. And the result is, good nutrient dense grass-fed meats. So, and healthier soils. I mean, we bring our sheep to an organic veggie farm to graze the cover crop. And I mean, those vegetables that are grown on the land where the sheep have grazed and the sheep have fertilized, they are the best tasting vegetables. Wow. I kid you not. I mean, they are so rich in minerals. I mean, you can just taste it. So, one thing you can do is say, oh, well, we use meat to grow our vegetables. So even if you don't, some of your listeners probably don't eat meat, and, that's totally fine. Right. However, you think of going back to, being in an intact wilderness like Denali, or deep in, some of the places here in the U.S. where there's just, you just see, it's just so much life, and that it's these species of wildlife have been here for so long, and many generations of deer and wolves and bear have been using these same trails. It's it's kind of like saying, oh, well, it would be healthier if that wilderness didn't have any animals and it just grew plants. Like, no, it wouldn't be. So your organic veggies would not be healthier if there were no animals, because there's no natural ecosystem devoid of wildlife and poop and, all that comes with birds and elk and deer and everything. There's, it wouldn't be that majestic, healthy wilderness without the animals. Yes. And so your farms aren't going to be nutrient dense, healthy soil, absorbing water, sequestering carbon without more life without
Yes.
animals, without insects, without birds, without, grazing, pooping animals.
Yes. I've got to transcribe that part. That is, you're so passionate about that, as am I. And I just love how you just got to the heart of the matter, you know?
Yeah, and I got to speak recently with Dan Kitteridge from the Bionutrient Association. You might have to have him on your podcast next
Okay.
because, because you look back at, going back to sort of food and the shift that's happened since industrial agriculture is that the mineral content has dropped like over
Uh-huh.
70%, the vitamins
Wow.
and minerals. So you probably need to eat 10 times the amount of carrots that you did
Mm-hmm.
50 years ago to get the
Mm-hmm.
same amount of vitamins and minerals. And nobody's going to eat that many carrots.
Yes.
So so what they're doing is actually measuring the nutrient density of this food and say,
Uh-huh.
think like if we could just eat less, what impact that would be on the natural resources of this planet. If we could
Uh-huh.
get the same amount of nutrients and vitamins and minerals out of less, then that would be incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes. Wow.
So,
So, Doniga, would you talk about I think you call it a documentary, Kiss the Ground, which I just can't recommend it enough to understand the things that you're talking about today. And you're in it. You and your family play major parts in this movie, which, can you talk about that?
yeah, Kiss the Ground. It's available on Netflix, and there's also other ways to watch it. And there's a school version as well that I highly recommend
Mm,
for anybody out there to recommend to their local schools. Get the school version of Kiss the Ground. And it's really, it's a film that's very well done. It took 7 years
oh my
to
gosh.
make. And so
Really?
you'll
Wow.
see sort of our kids kind of grow up through parts of the film. And it's really about our connection to soil and the ability of soil to really heal our planet and to basically take care of the climate crisis that we are in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten some great attention from policymakers around the world
Hmm.
to really take action for regenerative agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
So we need more good news like that. And it's not, that's the thing I really like about it. It's not one of those gloom and doom climate
Mm-hmm.
change documentaries that it actually has hope. And you might cry when you watch it. And so yeah, and it's great. It's been great working with Kiss the Ground because then they also have a 501c3 nonprofit that does a lot of education and advocacy. And so, it's really good to see people that aren't necessarily coming from an agriculture background really embracing farmers and ranchers and saying, what can we do to help?
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
What can we do? Like at somebody like me who had 0% nature in school, and just sort of the antithesis of you and your family and all the people that we meet and Kiss the Ground, the farmers. What can we do? That we live in cities like New York City. What could people who
Hmm.
live in New York City do? What could people who live in the suburbs do, like me? What
Yeah.
advice do you have?
Yeah, well, I say, there's definitely things that everyone can do. And the first thing that I say is tend to your personal soil. And that might be, a little garden plot on your balcony that you get some good, healthy soil that you can be in touch with. Because just the fact of touching healthy
Hmm.
soils, helps your gut microbiome and it helps your mood. It actually has been proven being in contact with healthy soils improves your serotonin levels, and just, grow something, because also when you're growing something green, you're drawing down carbon. And then work to purchase from soil savvy farmers. So learn about regenerative agriculture and how you can support farmers and ranchers who are practicing that. So that might be, like you, Cheryl, going to your local farmers market and really taking the time to source ethically and responsibly. And it's fun, right?
Absolutely.
And then also, act for the future generations. Really, we need to listen to those youth climate activists that are saying, okay, enough is enough. We're stuck with these problems. And, we want you to do something, older generation. So listen to them and act for them. Cook for yourself. That's a great one. And with the food that you source. And then I like to say, don't try to tame the wild, but tend to the wild. And the wild within you, tend to that wild that we all have, our intuition, and also tend to the wild outside. And however that might be, and it might just start with a relationship with a songbird or a squirrel in the park. So really start to get to know the non-human relatives around you and find ways that you can tend to the wild and help that wild to flourish.
Oh, that's so beautiful and inspiring. And what I love about it most of all is that everyone can do that. So I love that you said, grow a plant on your balcony and put your hands in that soil. I wouldn't even think that was going to make a difference. And you have just proven me wrong.
Yeah.
There's something that everybody could do.
Yeah, I mean, if everyone in New York City did that and it was covered with green growing plants, then that would absorb a lot of pollution.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm inspired. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. Cancer Talks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. If you'd like to be in community with other cancer thrivers seeking personal transformation, please join us on Zoom every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. Visit cancertalks.com/Zoom to register. If you're moved to donate, please visit patreon.com/cancertalks.